Hi students, good evening. Hope you are all doing well. So, in this class, I wish to start another essay that is prescribed for your study, that is linguistics and poetics. So, in the previous 3 or 4 lectures, we have seen the object of study, that is Saussure's object of study, and how Saussure was trying to present what was the object of study for linguistics. There, in his 3 parts of the essay, we have seen how he addressed 3 um, issues there. One on defining the language, and the other is the speech circuit and the linguistic structure. And the third one is language and its place among other human affairs. That is semiology. That is what we have seen. And in that essay, while dealing with Lang and Perol, by mistake, I said that Lang is individual speech act, but it is vice versa. That means Lang is the language, the system, and then parole is the individual speech act, how we speak, etc. So this is what is the distinction that he tried to maintain when he was discussing the definition of what is the definition of language, how to define language, that we have seen. Okay, so that is also, Saussure was also a linguist, and here now the essay that we are going to start is also a linguistic, that is Roman Jakobson. That is spelled with J, but we have to pronounce it as Jakobson. Okay, so Roman Jakobson. So let me give you a brief introduction to Roman Jakobson. Let me present my screen to you. Yeah. So, to give you a brief introduction to Roman Jakobson, who is born in 1896 and 1982, who in both literary studies and in linguistics was an exceptionally prolific scholar with broad interests. And that means his areas span very much, like phonology, philology, Slavic literature, folklore, general linguistics, aesthetics, comparative mythology, avant-garde painting, poetry, and comparative metrics, and all these. And all his studies in all these aspects, all in all these branches of study, has a very great outstanding impact on literary theory, especially in semiotics and also discourse analysis. One more thing is, he is also known in other branches of study like social anthropology and psychoanalysis also. Such a great figure in Russia, actually born in Moscow, and then circumstances forced him to go to different places, and then finally settle down in America. So he's a Russian born American linguist, Roman Jakobson. So he is born in Moscow, and he was a crucial figure in establishing, founding actually many uh, linguistic circles, which he started actually. um, See, let me tell you what are the linguistic circles that he was founded. First, in 1915, he founded Moscow Linguistic Circle along with Victor Sholowski and Boris Eichenbaum. See, in the previous lectures, about the theory in general, we have seen that Russian formalism has is actually uh, has the seeds of structuralism, because form in a for The other word for form we can take as structuralism. So in the formalistic influence is there on Jakobson, and he was there with Moscow Linguistic Circle, and then he was a member of Opojos, which is a society for the study of poetic language. So first he was in the linguistic circle, and he worked in in aesthetics or poetics from the point of view of a linguist, because basically he is a linguist. And he established the Prague Linguistic Circle in 1926. So 1950, he was the co-founder of Moscow Linguistic Circle along with Viktor Shklovsky, Boris Eichenbaum, and other scholars, critics also, and linguists. And then in 1926, he founded the Prague Linguistic Circle. And he actually was very much engaged critically with the works of Saussure. That is how he became a very great figure in literary criticism also for us. In 1943, he co-founded the Linguistic Circle of New York in America. So this we can see that he was very popular among many linguistic schools, and he was crucial in establishing many linguistic circles, and he worked very much in those linguistic circles. And as we have seen previously, that in the 20th century, beginning with T.S. Eliot, we observed that there was an urge among the literary critics and the literary scholars to give a scientific basis for literary criticism, or as the study of literature as such. So Roman Jakobson is no exception. So he was also one of the figures who actually tried to bring a scientific basis for criticism. So that is why he worked very much in many fields, which were having connection with literature, in understanding literature, etc. So basically, what we have to know about Roman Jakobson, here I am giving you some, when he was born, in what linguistic circles he was active, etc. What was the influence of his works on many other areas of study, etc. I'm not going into a detailed analysis of his life, works, etc., which you can find anyhow in Google also. You can find there. So with this brief introduction, of course, with many branches of study that he made, he went into. Of course, you can of course imagine what could be the influence of this great personality, a versatile personality, on the development of literary theory or literary criticism, etc. So let us actually this essay that is prescribed for you for your study, I think is published in 1960, and also it is actually a lecture that he delivered, regarding poetics. Okay. This is a big essay which he'll be dealing with many of his examples of the linguistic work that he carried out in Slavic languages and other languages, and in other branches of study also. So, but we'll be dealing with this essay where he actually gives the fundamental idea. Jakobson is very popular for giving this concept, that is functions of language. Different, his model of functions of language is also very popular. So he tries to connect these functions of language with the functions of words words in literature. He tries to connect that in literature also verbal messages have different functions, and of course when we go into the functions of language, we can't say that a word will be having only one function, etc., but they'll be having many functions, multiple functions. Only thing is one becomes the predominant function in a particular situation, and the same principle applies to the verbal message, which is actually called as literature and or poetry, whatever it is. So he tries to explain different functions of the verbal messages in literature in from these different perspectives of his functions of language. And he actually tried to bring out the literariness of the verbal message. That is what is more important, literariness of a verbal message, because you all know that what the language we use, the language we use actually is having many purposes, many functions. So it is not that we use language only in literature, because for our day to day lives also we use language, and any language for any purpose, of course, is a composition of some verbal messages. So he is trying to find out the literariness in the verbal messages. That is what makes the language in literature a very specific kind of language, which we use. So coming to the essay, in the first paragraph, actually, he's saying that he's giving, trying to give a difference, trying to present the difference between political conference and scholarly conference. Fortunately, scholarly and political conferences have nothing in common, naturally, because political conventions, they are arranged with a different aim in mind, or a different what you call with a different intention. But the scholarly conferences have nothing to do with the political intentions. Okay, there is what language. There also, in the political convention also we use language, and here in the scholarly conventions also we use language only. Yet how it is different? Okay, so here he is saying the success of a political convention depends on the generic agreement of the majority or totality of its participants. So how many actually participated in the political convention, and how and what they have agreed, etc. All these things will decide the success of a political convention. And then the use of votes and vetoes, however, is alien to scholarly discussion. And in a scholarly discussion, we may not have any use of votes and vetoes, okay, which are very important in political conventions, where disagreement generally proves to be more productive than agreement. So he says that in the scholarly conventions, rather than agreement, disagreement among the members or participants actually makes it more vibrant, a scholarly convention, whereas the political convention is not like that. It demands agreement. Disagreement discloses antinomies and tensions within the field discussed and calls for novel exploration. Actually, this is the scholarly way of looking at all conversations. When a scholarly conversations, we should not, there is no fixity. Actually, this is what we should learn as a students of literature, because multiplicity is everywhere. is there everywhere, and we have to agree the points of view that are being presented by each and everyone. They may be contrasting, some may be contrasting, some may be differing, and some may be accepting. But here, Jacobson is telling that disagreement discloses antinomies and tensions within the field discussed and calls for novel exploration, new explorations. When it is good when a disagreement comes in the scholarly conventions, because it leads to the new developments, new explorations, new inventions, or new discoveries. Not political conferences, but rather exploratory activities in Antarctica present an analogy to scholarly meetings. So he says that some activity, the exploratory activity that is that has taken place to Antarctica, if you are discussing that in a conference, it may present, it can be taken as an example, and it can be taken as an example of scholarly meetings. International experts in various disciplines attempt to map an unknown region and find out where the greatest obstacles for the explorer are. So if you read the whole paragraph, he is trying to present how in a scholarly convention or in a scholarly conference there should be a difference of opinion, which of course gives rise to the new research, new exploration, new discoveries and inventions. So there is, different aspects come in when, for example, he has given us an international conference on the what you call Antarctica, exploratory activities in Antarctica. So he's saying that he is saying that if we go through these examples, he says we can, in questions he is asking, have we not realized what problems are the most crucial and the most controversial? Have you not also learned how to switch our codes, what terms to expound or even to avoid in order to prevent misunderstandings with people using different departmental jargon? Such questions, I believe, for most of the members of this conference, if not for all of them, are somewhat clearer today than they were 3 days ago. So this is a part of a seminar that his lecture is going on, and he says that when questions come up in different issues only, novel explorations will come out. So now he telling about his argument that he was invited to this conference um, for summary remarks about poetics in its relation to linguistics. So he was invited to the conference to give to present on the relationship of poetics to linguistics. Of course, what is poetics we have seen. Actually, what is poetics we have been seeing, actually discussing in our third semester also, which started actually with the poetics test by Aristotle. Poetics is actually a treatise on how to write literature or how to read literature, or what makes literature, how the language of literature should be different, or though poetics by Aristotle deals with tragedy, we have seen poetics is in general a word that is for defining what literature is or what is criticism, etc. It is for the reader as well as writer. So here, let us see what Jacobson is telling. Poetics deals primarily uh, what makes a verbal message a work of art. So this is the significant point which Jacobson is going to address in this essay, that the title itself is revealing. Linguistics and poetics. You know what is linguistics, you know what is poetics. So what is the relationship? How linguistics speaks to poetics, or how linguistics can define poetics. or can we use linguistics to define poetics? This is the crux of the essay. This is the significant aspect that Jakobson is going to deal, and that is what he has given in the very beginning. And he says, what makes a verbal message a work of art? This is the question. So what makes a verbal message? Where all are verbal messages only. As I told you that language is everywhere. Every day we use language. It is not that we are using language only in a piece of literature like poetry, drama, novel. It is not like that. But verbal messages are everywhere. But how come some verbal messages are called as a work of art, which is, literature? Of course, a piece of literature is called a work of art because literature is also included in different art forms. So, first, Jakobson is putting this question: what makes a verbal message a work of art? Because the main subject of poetics is the differentia specifica. What is the main subject of poetics? Poetics want to show that the language that is there in literature is different from the general language. Okay, so what is it? So he is saying that the main point in poetics is a differentia specifica of verbal art in relation to other arts. So in comparison to the other arts, we have to see what is different in the verbal messages of in a work of art and in relation to other kinds of verbal behavior. Poetics is entitled to the leading place in literary studies. So, of course, poetics, of course, is poetics is nothing but literary criticism, literary theory. So, you might be asking, what is poetics? Don't ask me this question because we have this line also. What is poetics? Actually, poetics is nothing but our literary criticism, literary theory. So, the way we should read poetry. So, and why some language, some texts are being called as work of art, and whereas all literature that is, all writing that is being written cannot be called as work of art, because in the first semester itself you have been gone through the paper Introduction to Literature, where Professor Ramesh might have enlightened you what is, how to define and how difficult it is, and what types of are there, literature, paralliterature, etc., and all those things we have seen. So by now you could have understand that poetics is actually literary criticism, literature, and literary studies. So what is it poetics doing? It is trying to explain a way in which the literary studies should be carried out, etc. So all the literary critics, if you go to the way from the very beginning, like in English tradition, you have Sir Philip Sidney, who wrote Ars Poetica and also Biographia Literaria, etc. If you go back to that, they always try to explain how the language of literature should be. So it should not be like the general language. That is what you have to understand. So that is what Jakobson is saying as differentia specifica. So poetics is all about, deals with problems of verbal structure. So of course, we actually keep linguistics and poetics a bit far away. We think that linguistics is something very technical and something that is studying about the structure of language, etc. It's not about literature, but as a linguist, Jakobson is trying to connect poetics with linguistics. And so, of course, in his view, actually, of course, linguistics is the best way to understand poetics. So that, and further he is saying that poetics deals with problems of verbal structure. See, in the object of study, we have studied the linguistic structure. See, the object of study. What is the object of study for linguistics? That is what Saussure established, that it is the linguistic structure. Of course, in amidst the many aspects that are involved, okay, in language articulation, language acquisition, okay, etc. Saussure identified that we have to take linguists should take the linguistic structure and give it the um, um, highest position in the discourses of language, etc. So here, actually, I told you in the introduction that, of course, Jacobson has taken much from the work of Saussure, and he worked very much critically on the works of Saussure, and he brought out many contributions in linguistics. So actually, he says that what is it poetics doing for him as a linguist? Poetics is dealing with the problems of verbal structure, just as the analysis of painting is concerned with pictorial structure. So, of course, if you are trying to analyze a painting, a wall hanging, etc., any type of painting, what you should know, what is the pictorial structure, the basics of painting, etc. Now, to go into the poetics, Jacobson says that basic for poetics is verbal structure only, and we have to know what this verbal structure is. Then, since linguistics is the global science of verbal structure, poetics may be regarded as an integral part of linguistics. Of course, being a linguist, Jacobson says that because poetics is dealing with verbal structure, we can no doubt consider poetics also as an integral part of linguistics. So, of course, what we are dealing with in poetics is about verbal message, verbal structures, etc., how they are arranged. See, we have seen the literariness. I said the literariness, and we have seen many concepts like, defamiliarization or sublimity, sublime, the language of sublime, Horace and all others, and of course, even in Aristotle's, of course, catharsis theory also, we can find that. So he says that what poetics is dealing is only with the problems of verbal structures. So he thinks that, because linguistics is the global science of verbal structure. We all know that what is studied in linguistics, we all know it is all verbal structures, etc. So he says that we have to consider poetics as one of the integral parts of linguistics. Arguments against such claim must be thoroughly discussed, of course, because he, being a linguist, is proclaiming, stating that poetics can very well be taken as a part of linguistics. Now, there might be others. As in the introductory paragraph itself, he said that in a scholarly convention, there should be differences. Of course, many people may not be able to accept Jacobson's point of view. So he himself is saying that claims against my argument should be discussed. So it is evident that many devices studied by poetics are not confined to verbal art. So he says, it is evident if you go to poetics, many devices studied by poetics, they are not confined to verbal art. How? Let us see. We can refer to the possibility of transposing Wuthering Heights into a motion picture, medieval lessons into frescoes and miniatures, or Alaparus midi duan phone into music. Let's say ballet and graphic art, etc. It's dealing with some texts of literature. being transposed to other forms of art also. Wuthering Heights is made into a picture. I hope you might have seen that picture. And the legends are made into, oil paintings on a big canvas, they paint legends. And actually, if you go to some shrines also, temples or churches also, all mythological stories, scenes or tales from those will be painted. And looking at that painting, you will get the sense of that story behind or the legend behind. And of course, some are made into ballads, okay, and graphic arts, etc. However ludicrous the idea of the Iliad and Odyssey in comics may seem, certain structural features of their plot are preserved despite the disappearance of their verbal shape. Of course, Iliad and Odyssey are the greatest epics which we may not imagine in comics yet. Jacobson says that, of course, with certain structural features, they are preserved despite the disappearance of their verbal shape. So, the question of whether W.B. Yeats was right in affirming that William Blake was the one perfectly fit illustrated for the Inferno and Purgatorio is a proof that different arts are comparable. Of course, he is giving the example of W.B. Yeats, one of the popular poets of English literature, where he affirms that William Blake, I hope you all know about William Blake, he is one of the what you call the mystic poet, mysticism. William Blake is considered as a romantic poet, the harbinger of the romantic, though we consider William Wordsworth and Coleridge have begun in 1798 with the publication of lyrical ballads, that romanticism actually began, etc. Even before that, we see that much romantic element is present in William Blake poetry. It's his songs of experience, innocence, and many other. And he was a good illustrator also. He used to prepare illustrations with embossing on the copper plates, etc. That's a great work. So here, of course, he is the one who could illustrate the Inferno and a Purgatorio. And is, so this itself is a proof that, of course, what we call as art, even if it is poetics, those art forms are always not confined to literature. They can be transformed into many other art forms. So that is all these examples are being given by Jacobson to say that art, of course, we cannot look this in isolation. Arts also can be compared, as we have nowadays film studies, etc. So this is what you call, what is the word for that? Interdisciplinary research, etc. So film and art. So of course we think that a film is a variant of art or poetics only. So reading or analyzing films also is one of the poetics, work of poetics only. So we have the problems of Baroque or any other historical style transgress the frame of a single art. So some actually cannot be included under what you call one single art. That is what Jacobson is telling. And let me give you the meaning. Baroque, actually it came to English from a French word meaning irregularly shaped. At first the word in French was used mostly referred to pearls. Eventually it came to describe an extravagant style of art characterized by curving lines, gilt, and gold. So Baroque is also cannot be considered as a single form of art. When handling the surrealistic metaphor, we could hardly pass by Max Ernst's pictures of Louis Buñuel's films and others. the golden age. In short, many poetic features belong not only to the science of language but to the whole theory of science. So here he is trying to bring a universal nature. Okay, so he says that whatever you think is literature, whatever we think is literature, is not pertaining to only poetics. And but it is, he says that it is not only the science of language but it is also theory of science. As I told you that linguistic science or cultural science or many other science are there. Sign means SIGN. While dealing with Shashur's essay also, we have discussed that SIGN sign is not only in literature, or it is not only alphabet, or it is not linguistic sign. We have many cultural science or anthropology, many areas of knowledge. So this is what Jacobson also bringing here, and stating that here, of course, what you think is a particular form of literature, of course, transcends that border, and it can be considered into can be considered under another science of study, okay, etc. That is, he says that it can be general semiotics also. This statement, however, is valid not only for verbal art but also for all varieties of language, since language shares many properties with certain other systems of science, or even with all of them. So, actually, whatever he is telling here regarding poetics, which is transcending borders, of course, is applicable to not only poetics, it is also applicable to language also, because language also shares many properties with certain other systems of science, or with all of them, pan-semiotic features. Language has many multiple aspects, and within and outside it also. So one objection he is trying to present that even if some people want to say that poetics is not confined to verbal art, etc. He says that, of course, poetics is not only verbal art, but it can be transcending. Likewise, the second objection, of course, yeah, let me continue the second objection. I'll be sharing this PDF text to you, and I hope you can get a copy of it, or you can just download and keep referring to it when this essay we will discuss. We'll keep on discussing this essay, and it needs more lectures than 4 or 5, so we'll go through it. Okay, I am now stopping my screen share. So I hope you are able to follow whatever I have taught. Try to read the text again, and if you have any doubts, of course, you can interact in the next class. Have a nice time. Bye.